Hello. Welcome back to another fun-filled Wednesday afternoon of Myer Realty's Commercial Corner. I got that name all by myself correct today without the assistance of my brother who's running late. But
If I had the applause meter going, or the canned applause, I would turn it on for you.
All right, thank you. I'm here with my good buddy Bob Lunsford, local CCIM in our office over there at Myer Realty. And we're here today to talk about all things commercial real estate, but also we sort of trend off into things that certainly could apply to single-family stuff because many of the tools that are used to purchase, for instance, single-family can also be used to purchase commercial real estate, multifamily stuff, whatever you might be looking to buy. If you are out there and close to a phone and you'd like to call in, you have a question, concern, anything we can help you with, we'd love to chat with you. Try and keep it around, something to do with real estate. We enjoy talking about that on this show. The number is 844-790-8255. If you want to text, it's 775-237-2266. So, we are going to talk about the benefits of seller financing, or financing that's not done at an institution or a bank, really. We're going to talk about sort of all aspects of I guess unconventional, I'll call it.
Unconventional, it's referred to as, say, owner carry installment loans.
Right.
Where the seller with equity acts as the bank.
Correct. And there's some offshoots of that we'll get into a little later as well. Creative ways to use your equity while creating notes to do it. So we'll talk about that in a bit. But to start off, really there's many benefits to seller financing. And
for both sides, I might add, for both the seller and the buyer.
For both the seller and the buyer, that's correct. And, if you own your house free and clear, you don't even necessarily have to own it free and clear. And that's, I guess, I didn't think about that. We probably don't even want to go there because you can sort of wrap your note and then carry some of your equity and do different fancy things. But we won't go there right now. We'll just play like you are free and clear in your home and you want to sell it. And you come across a buyer who really wants your home, but he can't qualify for your home. And so how do we put this deal together? Well, if you don't need all your money, and many times we think we want all our money. And then one of the questions we like to ask folks is, well, if you had all the money, what would you do with it? Some folks do need it to move forward to into the next house or whatever they might need it for. But oftentimes you find that they kind of scratch their head and don't really give you a solid answer on that. And the fact is that if you don't need the money or don't know what you would do with the money, one of the things that's a very, I think, smart way to go, because you can make money on your money, and there's very few places you can go do that as safely as in a piece of real estate today, especially one that you're very familiar with. If you own it and you lived in it, for instance, or just if you own it and it's free and clear, it was an investment property, you're very familiar with it. So you understand very intimately what it is that note is tied to, the note that you're going to draw up for the buyer potentially. But so if the buyer can't qualify for whatever reason, there is that opportunity to be able to draw a note to finance the deal for the buyer yourself. And you have many, many different ways that note and those terms can be put together. We can't even go into all the different ways. There's just many, many different ways. But it gives you, as a seller, which we're speaking on the seller's perspective right now, the opportunity to draw up the note and massage the terms and conditions any way you want without being controlled by lending guidelines. It gets you outside of most of all that garbage, which is great. So you can take as little down as much or demand as much down as
that way. If you're selling the house, I might point out, if you're selling the house, you can establish your own yield. If your yield is, a cash on cash return or however you measure it, return on investment, or whatever you do, you can define the interest rate, the term of that loan, and effectively control how much money you put in your pocket every month.
Yep.
So you can draw up your own terms.
Yep, and that is one of the big benefits and beauties of that. Also, you can potentially sell your house. See, that financing that you might attach to this house to allow it to be sold to someone who maybe isn't financeable, or even if they are, but you insist you want to do the deal this way because you want to keep
To get that yield,
get
yes.
that yield off that money. It allows you to, like we were saying, put different parameters on it and different terms that may move that yield up or down or whatever you need, and allow, for instance, if somebody can't qualify, allow them to buy it. But even if they can, as I was saying, you could push them into what it is you want, and wind up with a nice annuity.
There's an old saying in real estate that our good friend points out. It said, "My price, your terms," or "your terms, my price." In other words, you give up on one and you get the other. So if your seller insists on the highest price for the property, then you as a buyer, you can devise your own terms. So it's a give and take negotiation. Other than just establishing the price, you have that other parameter to work with. That is the terms of the note. How much do you want to pay
Right.
for your monthly payment?
Right. And so if you, for instance, as a seller, are willing to offer a favorable term, you can push your sales price up, because that financing that you're offering, depending on the needs of the buyer, if the buyer is qualified anyway, it's not quite as valuable to them, but it's worth something. It's worth money, actually. So you can actually push the price of the house up and say, we'll do a 30-year 8% or 3.5%, but I want, X amount for my house, which is maybe 10 or 15 or 20 or whatever percent. I shouldn't say percent. I was going to say $1,000, but a few percentage points higher of a value on the house, because the financing comes with it.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
so.
Another advantage to that is that this transaction, you can do a fast close. That is, it's much more rapid than an institutional financing, than an FHA or a conventional loan or something, because a bank is not involved in this, and it's really just a negotiation between the buyer and the seller, and it's vetted through a escrow company. And usually the way you'd set up a deal like this is you would have a note servicing company take those payments, so that they're the middleman between the buyer and the seller, so everything is verified and documented.
Right, and then we as agents, you want to get a knowledgeable agent to do this, because really the agent, if you're a buyer, for instance, the agent can, or a seller, if we're representing either one, we can really make or break this deal with the kinds of terms we suggest and put together for our client. So it's really important to get somebody that knows how to sort of work those terms in your favor. And then you hand it off to the title company. They have lawyers that actually draw the note. So it's all drawn in a legal format. But we initially draw it up within the contract, the terms of the note, and they follow those terms. So those are negotiated within the deal. So.
It also, I might point out, from the seller's standpoint, it might result in a faster marketing. That is, a faster sale of your property, because you've really opened that property up to every possible buyer, even people who cannot qualify for conventional financing for bank loans. You've just spread the net that much more, and you've opened it up to that many more potential interested parties.
Very true. It broadens the market. It casts a wider net on the buyers out there. And it's very true about the closing as well. You don't have to deal with
appraisals.
You don't have to deal with appraisals. That's good point. And I was going to say TRID, but I'm not sure. TRID may still come into play. But TRID is mostly focused on lending.
Explain what TRID is.
I'm not sure I can exactly give a really good explanation for it, but it's the new lending guidelines that have come down from on high our wonderful, illustrious Congress and the Frank Dodd lending reform stuff that happened within the last, I don't know, 6-7 years, I guess, have put these new restrictions on lending, and also to some degree on escrow, through escrow. But I don't think I think that we actually fall outside of that, those parameters for the most part with seller financing. But we are going to continue this on the other side. Hang in there with us. We'll be right back. Thank you.
Reno Town Tonight magazine celebrates
844-790-8255. If you want to text in your questions, 775-237-2266. And we are discussing the benefits of seller financing. I would say the pros and cons, but I don't think there's a lot of cons. Matter of fact, I can't think of one. Can you, Bob?
No. I'd have to think about that a little bit, I guess. But there's nothing that jumps out at me, so
Yeah.
I guess the effective answer is no.
I think so. I think you'd have to think for a long time. So we're talking about seller financing and the benefits of seller financing and some of the interesting aspects of it and how it can help grease deals and some of the interesting ways that you can create notes and move them around, which we're going to get into in just a second here. But first of all, I was going to let Bob touch on maybe the tax saving aspect.
One of the benefits of this type of contract with a with a buyer is that as a seller, you don't have that big taxable gain. And you might roll that forward on investment property, and Fred can talk about a 1031 exchange, but you only pay taxes on the extent of the money as you receive them. So if you put the buyer puts down a 20% down or something like that, that's a chunk of money you would have to pay taxes on, and then you would pay taxes on that income as it comes in monthly. So, but you don't have the huge hit up front with the large gain that you would have in a regular institutional loan. So that's another benefit to it, that your tax savings are spread out over months and years, actually.
Well, actually, your tax
depending
burden.
on your tax burden is spread out over that months and years that for the term of the note. So
yeah, and so also I might jump in on that you can actually, regarding 1031, Bob, you can actually include a note in a 1031 tax deferred exchange and exchange that note forward into your next deal
as equity going forward.
Yeah, as equity going forward. So it doesn't there's nothing that bars you from doing that if you are still in the investment mode and you're not in retirement mode or, looking for an annuity type of a deal, which is what a note really is effectively. You can trade it forward in a 1031 tax deferred exchange, and we can certainly show you how to do that.
One point we might make, when you set these notes up, you want to make sure that the buyer puts enough money down so that he has some skin in the game. That's up to you to decide what you're comfortable with, but you don't want to structure a loan like this in which the buyer is only coming in with 5% or 10% or something. You probably want a minimum of 20% in just to make yourself comfortable, because your collateral is that property. So you don't want to allow a loan to be placed on it that is 80 or 90% of the value of that property, because that's over encumbering it. And if the buyer defaults and the market drops, then you've lost out there. So
yeah. And another thing, really quickly, I'll touch on is I guess the downside, maybe I've come up with one, is foreclosure. So there is that possibility, right, that the guy fails, but that may not be the end of the world, right, for you.
That foreclosure can happen under institutional or owner carry financing anyway.
Well, that's true, but if you're carrying the note, then it's your problem, not the bank's. So if it's your problem, though, I wanted to address that The problem is with a seller-created note in Nevada, I believe it is 90 days that you can have the property back. So it's pretty darn quick. It's not like these lenders these institutional lenders who are taking 1 to 2 to even 3 years and longer to get their properties back. You don't fall under the same guidelines, I guess, that they have. They've done it for a number of different reasons, not just guidelines, but they also done it because they want somebody else paying the heat and the electricity in the houses. But there's a lot of different reasons. But so, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. I know folks who have taken things back and done very well.
But again, I stress that there has to be enough money, enough cash up front to make sure that you're not going to lose out in the long term if the market, value swings on that property. So.
Right. No, definitely. You want to get enough. You want them to have enough skin in the game, as we say in the business. Where were we going?
Well, we talked a little bit about the benefits to the seller, but there are benefits to the buyer too, and we can kind of run through those rather quickly. I mean, for one thing, there's no onerous qualification process. I mean, there is a careful seller, you might want to look at the buyer's credit history and maybe references, that sort of thing. Make sure there's no recent bankruptcies, et cetera, et cetera. So you want to check him out a little bit. From a buyer standpoint, it may help to once he has a seasoned note, it's going to help his own credit history, right?
Well, it can. It depends on where it's being paid and if it's being reported to any agency or bureau. Typically, they're not. But I don't know for sure across the board whether that.
So
could happen.
another benefit is there's no loan costs. Usually, institutional loans will have a 0 to maybe even as much as 2%. Origination charge plus other costs related to escrow fees, things like that.
You still have the escrow fees, but they'll have other loan garbage costs.
Other loan costs,
yeah,
right?
Definitely, there's thousands of dollars to be saved right there because a loan origination is a biggie. On the savings side of things, it can be. Well, I know that lenders, their commissions are $3,000, $4,000, and $5,000 depending on the size, so that's built in there. There's definitely a price to be paid for that.
One final benefit to the buyer is that this can be done rapidly. So it's a fast close rather than a 45 or 60-day or 90-day period of which you have to go out and get an appraisal and wait for that appraisal and then do all the take the necessary steps for the qualification, the final approval and everything. This can be done rapidly.
Right. So let me run through a few of these. I've got a few little items here at the end of my list here I'd like to run through before Scott gives us the market update report for the week.
That's right.
Scott has finally decided to grace us with his presence.
Consider yourself graced.
Oh, thank you, Scott. So, I'll run down my little list. Down payment. You could get in for a smaller down payment than a bank requires. It depends. You have to negotiate that as a buyer. That would be a buyer benefit. Assumability. So this is where getting an agent who knows what he's doing or certainly has some of these.
Where are they going to find one of those, Fred?
They're going to find one of those at Myer Realty, 745-2918.
My job is done here.
You can leave now, Scott. No, seriously, we are adept at this. We've done this for years. We cut our teeth on this, actually. When we started in real estate, we were fortunate enough to start in a company that actually taught us this from day one. So it was really a blessing to actually work there and learn all this stuff really early in our careers. We've used it for years. So we know how to put these deals together. So you can write a note that is assumable. And then you've got, for you as the buyer, you've got something you can sell with the property. So once again, you have a value that you can bring to the table when you want to sell the property. And then the terms. The terms are open for negotiation. So you can go back and forth and you can negotiate a term that works for you and a payment, and it can have balloons, it can have this, it can have many, many different aspects to it. It can be due in 5 years, 2 years, 1 year, 10 years, 30 years. I mean, there's just so many different ways to slice and dice it. We can't go into all of it right now. Let's see, what else do I have here? Note creation. Okay, so another thing about paper, we'll call it paper, is you can create a note. So say you own a house or you own a piece of real estate and you have equity in that real estate. You could create a first and or even a second note. Say you want to buy another piece of real estate. You can do a what's called to be created note, write it into an offer, and use that equity or that note that represents the equity in whatever it is you own to trade into or use as a down payment for a property you might want to buy. So, and we can show you how to do that. We've done that before, and it's a great way to...
Aren't you doing that now?
I am. It's a great way to activate equity that sits in another property, and it costs you nothing to do that. You don't have to go to the bank, pay an origination fee, or get a HELOC, or any of that stuff. We can just pull it right out. It's so easy, you won't believe it. Notes can be traded. So you can trade a note. Those can be sold, and could be sold at a discount for cash. And by the way, if somebody sells you a house and they carry back for you a note, you can also put within that note that you would like a first right of refusal if that note were to be sold. So you could buy it at the discount because you own the house. Then you'd save yourself some money. Are you kidding me? Okay.
Thanks, Fred. Mr. Longwind. Anyway, so what we're going to do is we'll continue that market report. We'll give it next week, I guess. We'll give you a double report next
Come
week.
back next week and see us, 745-2918. Fred Myer, Bob Lunsford, Scott Myer, Myer Realty.